In the golden age of a sport of giants, few were bigger than George Foreman. Boom. From his powerful presence in the ring to a beloved figure in pop culture, his story is one of transformation.
Breaking news, sad news out of the sporting world. Boxing legend George Foreman is dead at the age of 76.
George Foreman lost final letter discovered, revealing the cause of death that shocked fans. For decades, George Foreman inspired millions with his remarkable journey from the dangerous streets of Houston's Fifth Ward to Olympic gold medalist, two-time heavyweight champion, beloved minister, and finally,
George Foreman was a two-time heavyweight champion, first taking the title in a second-round knockout against
one of the most successful entrepreneur-pitchmen in American history. His transformation from the scowling, intimidating fighter of the 1970s to the smiling grandfather figure selling grills remains one of sport's greatest reinvention stories. But a recently discovered letter, apparently written by Foreman in his final days, has revealed stunning details about his health struggles that he deliberately kept hidden from even his closest supporters. Born in 1949 to a family struggling with extreme poverty, young George Foreman's early life gave no indication of the extraordinary path that lay ahead. Dropping out of school at 15, he turned to street crime before joining the Job Corps at 16, a decision that introduced him to boxing and changed his life forever. Within just 3 years, this troubled teenager had transformed himself into an Olympic champion, winning gold at the 1968 Mexico City Games.
Foreman won the heavyweight gold medal in the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City.
His professional career would bring him the heavyweight championship in 1973 with a devastating destruction of previously undefeated Joe Frazier. Throughout his many career incarnations, from fearsome puncher to ordained minister following his religious conversion in 1977 to his improbable comeback and second championship at age 45 in 1994, to the businessman who earned over $200 million from the famous grill bearing his name, Foreman maintained an image of incredible physical durability and health. Unlike many former boxers who showed visible signs of their punishing career, Foreman remained articulate, sharp-witted, and physically robust well into his senior years. This made the contents of his final letter all the more shocking to those who discovered it. According to sources close to the Foreman family, the letter was found in a safety deposit box that was to be opened only after his passing.
Sad news out of the boxing world. George Foreman has passed away at the age of 76.
Written in Foreman's distinctive handwriting on his personal stationery, the 8-page document detailed health struggles that the boxing legend had deliberately kept private for years, revealing a much different reality than the vigorous public image he maintained. "I've spent my life showing strength," Foreman purportedly wrote in the letter's opening paragraph. "First with my fists, then with my faith, finally with my perseverance and business success. But for the last few years, I've been fighting a battle I couldn't win with any of those tools. I kept this private because I didn't want pity, and because I worried what it might do to my family and business if people knew the truth." The letter goes on to describe how Foreman had been diagnosed with a rare form of brain protein misfolding called CTEX, an advanced variation of chronic traumatic encephalopathy that typically affects boxers and football players who have suffered repeated head trauma.
All of these people have one thing in common. They're all at risk for CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, a brain disease caused by repetitive hits to the head. It can be deadly.
Unlike typical CTE, which can currently only be diagnosed posthumously, this variant reportedly produced distinctive protein markers that could be identified through experimental blood testing while the patient was still alive. "The doctors told me it started decades ago, probably after the Ali fight," Foreman allegedly wrote, referring to his famous 1974 Rumble in the Jungle loss to Muhammad Ali in Zaire. "All those punches, all those fights, they were causing damage I couldn't feel at the time. The hardest part is knowing that my comeback in my 40s, the thing everyone considered my greatest achievement, likely accelerated the condition." Medical experts consulted about this condition cautioned, that while CTE is a well-documented neurodegenerative disease, the specific variant described in Foreman's letter remains controversial in the scientific community. Some neurologists recognize the emerging research around detectable biomarkers, while others maintain that definitive CTE diagnosis still requires posthumous examination of brain tissue. According to the letter, Foreman first noticed symptoms shortly after his final fight against Shannon Briggs in 1997. Occasional memory lapses, uncharacteristic mood changes, and intermittent tremors in his hands that he concealed during public appearances. "I'd be in the middle of a sentence, and suddenly the words would just disappear," he reportedly wrote. "Or I'd find myself in a room in my house with no idea why I went there. I kept telling myself it was just age, but deep down, I knew it was more." The letter describes how Foreman sought treatment from specialists around the world, often traveling under aliases to maintain his privacy. He allegedly participated in experimental treatments and clinical trials, some showing promising temporary results before his symptoms eventually resumed their progression. "I tried everything," the letter states. "Stem cells in Mexico, experimental drugs in Switzerland, brain stimulation techniques in Japan. Some would work for a while, and I'd think I had beaten it, but it always came back stronger." What makes the letter particularly poignant is Foreman's explanation for why he kept his condition secret. According to the document, he worried that public knowledge of his brain condition would undermine boxing, a sport that had given him every opportunity in life, despite its dangers. "Boxing saved me from prison or an early grave," he purportedly wrote.
Foreman would return to boxing at the age of 38, and it was an incredible comeback. After getting a couple of title shots,
"It gave a poor kid from Houston a chance to see the world and make something of himself. I couldn't be the one to destroy other kids' chances by becoming the cautionary tale." There were also business considerations. The letter allegedly reveals that Foreman feared his health struggles might damage the trustworthy, reliable image he had carefully built as the face of the George Foreman Grill and numerous other business ventures. "The grill and other businesses don't just support me," he wrote. "They provide for my family, my church, my youth center, and hundreds of people who work in companies bearing my name. I couldn't put all that at risk by going public." Perhaps most heartbreaking is Foreman's reported description of how he trained himself to mask symptoms during public appearances. The letter details techniques he developed to hide tremors, memory lapses, and disorientation, keeping his hands in his pockets or clasped together during interviews, wearing weighted wristbands under his jacket sleeves to reduce visible trembling, and developing a repertoire of stock phrases and stories he could fall back on when his train of thought suddenly vanished. "Before every public appearance, I'd repeat to myself, 'Big smile, speak slowly, keep it simple,'" the letter states. "When I felt an episode coming on, I'd find a way to exit or change the subject. Most people just thought good old George was being folksy or slightly absent-minded. Nobody suspected I was fighting to remember where I was or who I was talking to." According to those familiar with the letter, Foreman expressed particular gratitude to his wife Mary, who became his hidden caretaker and protector. "Mary became my memory, my shield, my everything," he allegedly wrote. "She'd stand just off camera during interviews with signals we'd worked out. A touch to her ear meant I was starting to repeat myself. Adjusting her glasses meant I'd lost track of the question. Without her, everyone would have known years ago." The letter reportedly reveals that Foreman's medical team had given him a stark prognosis in his final years, warning that the condition would eventually affect the brain regions controlling basic bodily functions. "They told me how it would end," he wrote. "First more cognitive decline, then loss of motor control, eventually affecting the brainstem functions like breathing and heart rate. I've been preparing for this ending for longer than anyone knew." What makes this revelation particularly shocking to the boxing community is how it contrasts with the prevailing narrative of Foreman as one of the sport's great success stories, a fighter who, unlike many of his contemporaries, had seemingly escaped the neurological damage that plagued so many boxers. Muhammad Ali's visible decline from Parkinson's disease had for decades been boxing's most prominent reminder of its dangers.
3 years ago today, boxing great Muhammad Ali passed away at his home in Scottsdale after a long battle with Parkinson's disease.
While Foreman's apparent health and vitality into his 70s had suggested that not all fighters faced the same fate. I sometimes felt guilty when people would comment on how well I'd aged compared to other boxers, Foreman allegedly confessed in the letter. If they only knew that I was fighting the same battle, just behind closed doors. The difference was, I had the resources to access treatments most fighters couldn't dream of, and I had built a public persona that gave me room to hide. Boxing historians note that this revelation, if confirmed, would add a bittersweet dimension to Foreman's legendary comeback in the 1980s and 90s. What fans celebrated as an inspiring story of determination and self-reinvention may have actually accelerated the brain damage that would eventually claim his life. The letter purportedly acknowledges this painful irony. The comeback that made me most famous might have shortened my time. But I can't regret it. Those years gave me the platform to help others and secure my family's future. The letter reportedly takes an emotional turn when addressing Foreman's faith, a cornerstone of his public identity since his religious conversion in 1977. According to those familiar with its contents, Foreman described struggling spiritually with his diagnosis, questioning why God would allow this particular challenge after he had dedicated his life to ministry and helping others. There were dark nights when I questioned everything I believed, he allegedly wrote. I'd preach about God's plan on Sunday, then come home and ask why his plan for me included watching my mind slowly betray me. The hardest test of faith isn't believing in God when things are good. It's holding on to that belief when you're facing your worst fear. The letter reveals that Foreman eventually found peace by reframing his struggle as his final opportunity for service. I came to see that by facing this disease with dignity and without self-pity, I could offer one last testimony, he wrote. Not the kind I could give from a pulpit, but the kind that comes from walking through fire without letting it consume you. Family members who have acknowledged the letter's existence but declined to share its full contents confirm that it includes detailed instructions for his foundation to fund CTE research and support programs for aging boxers experiencing cognitive decline. According to these sources, Foreman directed a significant portion of his estate toward establishing rehabilitation centers specifically designed for former fighters suffering from boxing-related brain injuries.
Football, ice hockey and boxing all have one thing in common: contact sports which can cause severe impacts on the bodies of sportsmen and women, including their brains.
Centers that would provide care regardless of the fighter's financial circumstances. Too many of the men I fought with and against have ended up broke and broken, their brains damaged, and their medical needs ignored, Foreman allegedly wrote. The public cheers when we're in the ring, then looks away when we can't remember our own names 20 years later. I want my last act to be changing that reality for as many fighters as possible. Sports medicine experts note that if authenticated, Foreman's letter could have significant implications for boxing and combat sports. Coming from someone of Foreman's stature, a beloved figure who continued to promote boxing throughout his life, these revelations might carry more weight than warnings from medical professionals or less popular boxing figures who have raised concerns about the sport's long-term neurological impacts. George Foreman criticizing boxing would be like Colonel Sanders criticizing fried chicken, explained one sports neurologist. He built his identity around the sport, so acknowledging its role in his brain disease represents a powerful statement that's harder to dismiss than when it comes from outside critics. The letter reportedly concludes with messages to those who knew Foreman in different phases of his remarkable life. Fellow boxers, religious colleagues, business partners, and most poignantly, his family. With 10 biological children, including 5 sons all named George Edward Foreman.
He did name all 5 of his sons George. George Edward Foreman, 5 sons, all named George.
Plus several adopted children, Foreman's family legacy represents perhaps his most meaningful achievement. "To my children," he allegedly wrote in the letter's final section, "I've given you my name, my values, and whatever wisdom I've gained along this journey. Now I give you this final truth, not to burden you, but to free you. I haven't been whole for some time, but I've been loved completely, by God, by your mother, and by each of you. In the end, that matters more than any fight I won or lost, in or out of the ring." Response to the letter's discovery has been mixed, with some questioning its authenticity, while others point to subtle changes in Foreman's public appearances over recent years that, in retrospect, might have hinted at the struggles he was concealing. Video analysts have identified instances where Foreman seemed momentarily confused during interviews, quickly recovered with a joke or smile, and redirected conversations, possible evidence of the coping mechanisms described in the letter. Medical professionals specializing in CTE and other neurodegenerative conditions caution against drawing definitive conclusions without further evidence, but acknowledge that the symptoms described in the letter are consistent with what many former boxers experience. They note that individuals with Foreman's resources and public profile often have both the means and motivation to conceal such conditions far more effectively than the average person. Representatives for the Foreman family have neither confirmed nor denied specific details from the letter, issuing only a brief statement. "Our father lived his life with dignity, courage, and integrity, including in his most personal challenges. We ask that the public respect our privacy as we continue to process our loss and decide how best to honor his wishes regarding his legacy." Whether or not the letter proves authentic, it has already sparked renewed conversation about the price athletes pay for our entertainment, particularly in sports where brain trauma is an inherent risk. It raises uncomfortable questions about how we celebrate physical courage while often ignoring its long-term consequences, and about the silent struggles that may exist behind even the most seemingly triumphant public personas. For George Foreman, a man who reinvented himself multiple times throughout an extraordinary life, this final revelation, if true, would represent one last meaningful transformation, from a symbol of boxing's possibilities to a powerful reminder of its costs. As one boxing commentator noted, "If even George Foreman, with all his success and apparent vitality, couldn't escape the consequences of those blows to the head, it forces us all to reconsider what we're really watching when we cheer on these fighters." In a career defined by remarkable comebacks, this would be the one battle Foreman couldn't win, fought privately, with the same courage he once showed under the bright lights of boxing arenas around the world. With Donald Trump back in the White House, her words could have very serious implications. Why is she speaking out now, and how will this affect the way people see her and the president? Join us as we look into Melania's terrifying message to all Christians in 2025. Melania's terrifying message. Melania Trump has always been known as a practicing Christian, someone who loved Catholicism, but now she's sending shockwaves through the Christian community. In her new memoir, the former First Lady openly declares her support for abortion at any stage of pregnancy. For many Christians, this is beyond shocking. It's making people question the Republican Party's stance on abortion moving forward. Melania has rarely shared her political views with the public, but in her book, Melania, she talks about her youth in Slovenia, her modeling career in New York, and her marriage to Donald Trump. The real question is, why now? Why is she suddenly sharing her views on abortion? And how are Christians reacting? Stick around, it's just about to get more interesting. According to a book excerpt released by The Guardian, Melania says it's imperative for women to have autonomy in making decisions about having children. She argues that no one else should have the power to decide what a woman does with her own body. Melania believes restricting abortion is the same as denying a woman control over her own body. She says she has carried this belief throughout her entire adult life. Her stance comes from a core set of principles: including individual liberty and personal freedom. She also believes people should put their own care first. She explains that it's a straightforward concept. Everyone is born with fundamental rights, including the right to enjoy life. She says people are entitled to a gratifying and dignified existence. In her view, this applies to a woman's right to make decisions about her own body and health. Donald Trump's campaign has not responded to the Christian Post's request for comment, but pro-life writer Jonathan Van Maren has already warned that the Republican Party will keep shifting toward a pro-abortion stance as long as the Trump family is running it. He points out that Lara Trump, co-chair of the RNC, is pro-choice. He also notes that Eric Trump has confirmed Donald Trump has always been pro-choice, despite keeping his bargain with the pro-life movement. Kristen Hawkins, president of Students for Life of America, says Melania lost an opportunity to be a role model for women. She makes it clear that she won't be buying the memoir. She calls Melania's support for abortion anti-feminist and says it clearly goes against Catholic teachings. She believes abortion ends an innocent life and that it tells women they can't balance children and a career, forcing them to pick one. Melania Trump didn't stop at just her book. She doubled down on her stance in a video she shared online, making it clear where she stands. She talked about how Christ helps people prosper at home, at school, at work, as mothers, and even as role models. But for many Christians, that message feels completely at odds with what she's saying about abortion. Christian podcaster Allie Beth Stuckey didn't hold back. She pointed out that Melania's views on abortion sound exactly like what Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris has been saying all along. She also doesn't believe the Trump team will win over pro-choice women with this stance. Marjorie Dannenfelser, president of the pro-life group Susan B. Anthony Pro-Life America, also reacted to Melania's comments. She said much of what the former First Lady is saying simply isn't correct. But despite her frustration, she made it clear that defeating Harris in the upcoming election remains her group's top priority. Melania's book is set to be released just 1 month before Election Day, right in the middle of a heated presidential race where abortion has been a major topic. Former President Trump has bragged about returning the abortion issue to the states by appointing Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe and Wade. But at the same time, he has said he wouldn't push for a national abortion ban if he becomes president again. On the Democratic side, Harris has been a strong supporter of abortion for years. She wants Roe restored, but hasn't said exactly what limits she supports. Melania writes in her book that late-term abortions are rare and usually only happen in extreme cases, like severe fetal abnormalities or when the mother's life is at risk. She emphasizes that these decisions come after careful discussions with doctors and that timing matters, but reports suggest many late-term abortions aren't for medical reasons. The Atlantic interviewed Colorado abortionist Warren Hearn, who performs abortions even when a baby could survive outside the womb. Colorado has no abortion restrictions, and Hearn got frustrated when asked if he'd perform one on a healthy woman at 30 weeks. He argued that pregnancy itself is a health risk and admitted to doing at least 2 sex-selective abortions. He also believes viability isn't about how far along a pregnancy is, but whether the woman wants to continue it. But beyond her views on abortion, let's take a look at Melania's Christian faith. Melania Trump's journey of faith. Melania's Christian journey starts with her early life in communist Yugoslavia, where religion was suppressed. Born Melania Knavs on April 26, 1970 in Slovenia, she later Germanized her name to Melania Knaus. Her father, Victor, had ties to the Communist Party and worked as a car dealer, while her mother, Amalia, was a clothing designer. Despite state atheism, Melania and her sister were secretly baptized as Catholics. She began modeling at 16, signed with an agency in Milan at 18.
And I traveled around the world modeling and had a great career.
And later moved to New York in 1996, working with top photographers and landing magazine covers. In 1998, she met Donald Trump at a fashion party, initially turning him down before they started dating. They married in 2005 in a lavish Palm Beach ceremony attended by celebrities like Shaquille O'Neal, Barbara Walters, and the Clintons. In 2006, she became a U.S. citizen and gave birth to their son, Barron. When Donald announced his presidential run in 2016, Melania, who usually stayed out of the spotlight, was suddenly thrust into public attention. Along with that came scrutiny of her past modeling work, which included some controversial moments. Her personal faith remained a mystery during the campaign. She didn't talk about it much, and even when she became First Lady, she rarely spoke about her beliefs. Certain moments confirmed that she practiced Catholicism, but she never made a big deal out of it. During the campaign, Donald mentioned that he was Presbyterian, but it was unclear if Melania shared his beliefs or had her own views. Donald Trump's faith has been widely discussed, both by his supporters and critics. But when it comes to Melania, very little has been said. No one really knows what she does on Sundays or how she practices her faith. Even throughout the entire presidential campaign, no one seemed to focus on this part of her life, leaving many to wonder where she truly stands when it comes to religion. So where does she stand? Stay tuned. We're just about to uncover that. Melania does have faith. She gave a hint about it during her first public speech as First Lady when she opened with the Lord's Prayer. This happened at a rally in Orlando in February 2017.
Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses.
But even after that, many Americans still questioned whether she was truly a Christian. Some of the criticism came from the White House Christmas decorations, which people said felt impersonal and cold 2 years in a row. Another moment that pointed to Melania's religious beliefs was her wedding to Donald Trump. They got married in 2005 at an Episcopal church in Palm Beach, Florida. It was a traditional service, but there was something unique about it. Melania walked down the aisle carrying an ancient rosary. Instead of the usual wedding march music, a soprano singer performed Ave Maria. Instead of a bouquet, she held a rosary. This detail gave a glimpse into the depth of her personal faith. During the ceremony, Pope John Paul II placed his hand over Melania's and made the sign of the cross, a great honor for Catholics. She later called it a humbling experience, and her spokeswoman confirmed she was a practicing Catholic. Her Vatican visit with Pope Francis further solidified this. After he shook her hand, she publicly confirmed her faith, had her rosary blessed, placed flowers at a Madonna statue, and prayed in a Vatican hospital chapel. In Israel, she visited the Western Wall and the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Her spokeswoman reaffirmed her Catholic identity, but didn't confirm if she attended Mass. Her black dress and veil when meeting the Pope echoed Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. Through these moments, her faith was quietly part of her role as First Lady. But what about her philanthropic efforts? What causes did she champion? How did she use her platform to support charitable initiatives? Get ready for the most epic moment of the video. President Trump's religious policies in 2025. Melania Trump's faith has always been a topic of quiet speculation. She rarely spoke about it, but moments like her recitation of the Lord's Prayer at a rally in 2017 and her meeting with the Pope made one thing clear. She identifies as a Catholic. Yet, her time as First Lady left many questions unanswered. Was her faith personal, or even shared with her husband? What you're about to hear will blow your mind. With Donald Trump back in the White House, these questions have taken on an entirely new meaning. Donald Trump has just made a shocking move. He has announced the creation of a White House faith office led by a controversial televangelist. At the same time, he has set up a task force with a chilling goal to wipe out what he calls anti-Christian bias. On February 6th, at the National Prayer Breakfast in Washington, Trump revealed his plan. He said he was creating a presidential commission to protect Christians from religious discrimination. The faith office will be led by Reverend Paula White, a televangelist known for her strong opinions. In the past, she even called the Black Lives Matter movement the Antichrist. During his speech, Trump made it clear that he wants to defend Christians in every part of American life. He said that as long as he is in the White House, Christians will be protected in schools, the military, government, workplaces, hospitals, and public spaces. He also said this effort would bring the country back together under God. For some Americans, this was a powerful message, but for others, it was deeply controversial. What you're about to hear will blow your mind. Trump also announced that the new Presidential Commission on Religious Liberty will work non-stop to protect this right. As part of this, he signed an executive order appointing Attorney General Pam Bondi to lead a special task force. Their job is to eliminate anti-Christian bias and put an end to any kind of targeting or discrimination against Christians within the federal government.